Hello everybody, today I would like to talk about sharpness and the maintenance of sharpness. Why would I want to mention about sharpness is that many people in the sword circle is very far away from the knowledge of sharpness. This is a very strange phenomenon, but if you compare the sword people to the knife people, you will find that the knife people are much more into the research of sharpness and the maintenance of sharpness than the sword people were. It is maybe because of the background that's composed of the sword community. In the sword community, there are many collectors that don't care about sharpness at all. They just want to collect the sword and put it on the wall, hanging on the wall as decoration. It could be like this, or some swordsmanship practitioner that don't cut at all, or don't cut anything substantial, realistic. So they do not care much about sharpness, and many of them are just sparring actually, and they think sharp swords are useless to them and not useful at all. And I have met this kind of people in Russia. And also Eastern Europe. So they are very far away from the reality of sharpness. And there are also people who cut, but they are not as deep into the knowledge and the research of sharpness as the knife dudes are. Very few people nowadays in the sword circle do the cutting in daily basis, either with swords or with knives, and very few of them actually live with a trade that cut in very frequently. So when I first come to the sword, I wasn't aware of what sharpness is either. That is 2000 years, back in 2000 years. And then along the years, with my own experiments in cutting and sharpening, I come to realize sharpness, the reality of sharpness, which is very far from my initial impression or misunderstanding of sharpness. That's why I would like to talk about it. First of all, what constitutes sharpness is that the acute apex forming in the cross section of an edge. The sharper, the more acute the cross section is, the sharper the edge is gonna be. But that also means the less material is around the apex area, right? So that is, the less material you have on the edge, the less atoms forming the apex, you get a sharper edge. And that also means the weaker it is gonna be. How weak, you may ask? You can imagine that the sharpness of an edge is like the bullet capacity, the round capacity of a magazine. The sharpness of an edge, when it is very sharp to begin with, drops right away from each cut basis. I have a graph for you to take a look, and I will put it on the video. It was very surprising for me at first. People may not realize that I actually do cutting on daily basis because I work on our kind of sparring sword, the realistic sparring weapons, and we have to cut many fabric-like material, including Kevlar and some PU. And also we cut foam for shock absorption. We cut this stuff with knives at over 65 hardness, which is very, very hard. And even with such hardness and a Lancelot sharp edge, the sharpness drops on each cut basis. So the knife nerds, how we call them nerds, okay, the knife people, have terms for this kind of phenomenon. they have initial sharpness, which indicates the sharpness that came from the sharpening stone just out of it, which is full capacity magazine. And then you cut once, you lost one round in the capacity. You cut twice, the sharpness drops significantly, and you lost your second round in the capacity in the magazine. About 3 cuts later on, you are already into another term, which is called working sharpness. The working sharpness will last for a much longer time than the initial sharpness. It will keep working, but it would not cut as good as the initial sharpness. But usually we will stick with the working sharpness without resharpening that frequently. Then I also came into contact with some information on the sword forum that a friend worked in butcher shop, and the friend mentioned how frequently they sharpen their butcher blade. In fact, they sharpen very frequently compared to my original estimation. They are like, after each cut, they steel their edge with a rod of steel to realign the apex back straight. Actually, this process will take away a little bit of the material that was rolled in the cutting. You see, each time you cut, each time, the apex, because of so minimal of atoms being there, so minimal of materials being there, it will roll a little bit to either left or right, which is natural. And then the butcher will steel their blade with a rod of steel. They think that will realign the apex back to straight. With microscope nowadays, with research done on this steeling process, it is found that it actually doesn't realign like this by pushing it back. It actually takes away the material that was rolled and form another apex that is slightly blunter. That is what actually happens in microscopic scale. Then, so with the steeling process, the blade keeps functioning in working sharpness for maybe a week, and then they resharpen it again. And the knife they use will last about 6 months after all the sharpening that went through it, and then the knife is disposed. So sharpness does not last. Remember this. This is a very, very important point. Sharpness does not last at all due to the fragility on the apex. With so little metallic atoms there, it will get blunt, rolled right away. The point is that with knife people, they care about initial sharpness as well as working sharpness. And once the working sharpness start to drop to a point that it doesn't work much at all, they resharpen the blade. And usually knives are harder than swords because the knives are usually shorter and can be made with harder tempering, without the worry of the blade breaking due to the length. With a sword, you usually get a lower hardness in trade of the ductility and elasticity. That means your sword sharpness drops even faster than a knife does. But there is a relatively good news for sword, is that sword cutting does not equate to knife cutting. With a knife, you usually, when we do the craft work, we cut with very low velocity, but with very high precision, with very low force, slow motion cutting for the precision. With sword cutting, you swing with high velocity, high momentum, and with impact. So while the initial sharpness of a sword drops right away on the first cut, the working sharpness stays longer than a knife does because of the velocity that was behind the motion of the cutting. It makes the blade still cut despite losing the initial sharpness for a longer period. That is the sword cutting difference between the sword and the knife. So now we know about a bit of the sharpness realism. We have to be aware that what would be hazardous to your edge, because when you come into contact with a sword that is very, very sharp, there are things you should be realized that you shouldn't do at all. First of all, avoid any kind of contact with the edge as much as possible, because any kind of contact with the apex will take away your initial sharpness. What I mean by any kind of contact, sword on sword contact will immediately destroy your edge. This is no doubt, okay? This is beyond consideration. Even the bind and wind in German swordsmanship, the bind crank will damage your edge right away, and then the winding, your edge is no longer sharp. Because metal versus metal contact is instantly blunting your sword. So remember this, even if your edge is touching something softer than the steel itself, it would still blunt your sword, because the edge, as I mentioned before, forms sharpness by having very few atoms at the apex. Even it is harder than the subject it touch, but it is so little atoms there, it will still blunt your edge. Which means, for example, touching plastic, touching wood, just like the kydex sheath and your wooden sheath, will blunt your sword. And cutting paper, cutting fabric will blunt your sword. The edge apex can roll over a little bit, just like the example I raised about the butcher shop operation. Cutting except the air. Water, okay. Anything solid will blunt your sword, more or less, in different kind of speed, different kind of progression speed. So when we handle a very sharp sword, we will have to put special care in how we unsheath the sword and sheath the sword by minimalizing the contact making with the sheath. And also you will like to avoid any contact with other metallic objects, contact with the wall, contact with plastic, contact with your floor, contact with other swords. You will have to minimize every kind of contact. Don't touch anything you do not mean to cut. Very few swordsmen have this kind of realization. So let me demonstrate how I unsheath and sheath the sword. For example, this one is Lancelot sharp. Usually you see people demonstrate their swordsmanship by a quick draw, right? And then a sheathing without eyesight, doing something like this. Don't ever do this with a very sharp sword. This is not only dangerous to your sword edge, but also dangerous to yourself, because a very quick draw can cut open your sheath and cut to your finger. It happened to one of my friends, and he has PTSD after that for a very long time. And the unsheathing can go wrong by puncturing your forearm and blunting your blade as well. So when you are not in combat situation, try to preserve your edge as much as possible, just like preserving the rounds in your magazine of your gun by not randomly firing into something you do not mean to. First of all, push with your thumb so that it comes out from the sheath a little bit first. Loosen it up first, and then when you unsheath the blade, make sure that it slide on the spine, not on the edge. Slide on the spine out. And along the whole process, watch carefully not to touch the tip to the sheath, because there is a possibility of your blade knocking inside the sheath and blunt itself. You see, when you pull it out, you may sometimes become rushy, impatient, and rotate your blade out like this. And if you rotate your blade out like this, you are gonna cut your sheath with the tip of your blade, and it will get blunt at best. At worst, it will cut your sheath open and cut your fingers off. So don't do it in a rush. Do it patiently. This is not a combat situation. So take your time and unsheath your sword with the spine in contact with the sheath the whole time. How to make sure of that is that when you unsheath your sword, try to rotate your sheath slightly. Let me show you. Now, when you unsheath your sword, try to put a little bit of rotating force slightly toward this side, so that the tip stick to the back of the sheath. When you rotate your sheath like this will force your tip to stay away from cutting this side of the sheath, right? You are rotating the sheath like this. It will force your tip to actually pushing your tip to the spine of your sheath. Now I unsheath it with a little bit of rotating force toward this side to make sure the tip stay on the back of the sheath. This is how I unsheath the sword. And also, when you're unsheathing, you have to make sure the blade is coming out with the edge aligned with the mouth of the sheath, without the blade rotating inside this mouth. If the blade rotates inside it, it can still cut the two walls of the sheath and blunt your blade. This is how I take the sword out, and then I put the sheath down. And when I handle a sword, I usually make it close to body, like a royal guard standing with rifle, point upward, so that when I turn around, I don't hit the surrounding environment with the blade accidentally. And when I drop something on the ground and I want to fetch it up, pick it up, I do not hit the floor with the tip of my sword. I just crouch and pick stuff up and then take a look, right? Of course, you have to make sure you have enough ceiling height to prevent putting your tip to the ceiling. I know some houses in the overseas are very low ceiling, so you have to be aware of that. Do not put your sword like this and then turn around and you hit everything around you. Do not lower the tip like this and then turn around. You are going to swipe the floor with it. Do not hold the sword like this. Never hold the sword like this. Many HEMA people do this. Super stupid, because the tip is close to your shin. When you walk around like this, you are risking hitting your shin with the tip of the sword or the edge of the sword. You are also risking putting the tip on the floor and blunting the tip. You see, when you blunt the tip, it loses the blade length permanently. there is no way to get that blade length back from blunting. Every sharpening is a permanent loss. Okay, there is no way to put atoms back on the blade. So if you blunt it on any accidental contact or with the floor, you ask for it. You lose permanent blade length and blade width and sharpness with this accident. Please be aware of this, okay? Your sword is only going to get shorter and shorter, narrower and narrower, and blunter. It will never get sharper than the original geometry. Okay, and then we come to how to sheath the sword. We sheath the sword very carefully. First of all, make a contact with this back of the sheath mouth with the spine, and then rotate very slowly so the tip go inside the mouth of your sheath. Watch the whole progress, okay? Do not do invisible sheathing, and then slowly slide the blade back into the sheath with the same slight rotation force on the sheath to make sure the tip is in contact with the back of the spine instead of contacting the front of the sheath. Okay, so to make sure it doesn't cut the sheath at all. Let me do it once more. This time I do it with another angle. This angle, so you can look from another angle. First of all, make a contact with the sheath mouth to your sword spine, and then rotate the sheath so that it goes into the sheath mouth, and you can see that I align the edge toward the sheath mouth, and with a slight rotational force, I slide the sheath down the blade. Okay, so that's how I sheath a sword. And you may ask, what happens if I have a two-edged sword? Two-edged swords are very difficult to maintain zero contact with the sheath, but you can try the best you can. For example, let me see if I have anything to show you. Yeah, this one. This is a two-edged sword. When you pull a two-edged sword out, make the contact on the flat surface. Do not pull along, do not pull with contact on the edge to the sheath, but pull with the spine of the blade in contact with the sheath, like this. You see, the edge is here and here. Do not slide it out like this. Slide it out like this, so that flat. Wow, this one is tight. It's in contact, but you can see, you can hear from the rattling that the edge already touched the sheath and the sharpness dropped. So as I said, with two-edged sword, you can only try as best as you can, and then slide it out. Try to touch as little as possible with the edge, and then like this. Putting it back is the same. Make contact with the spine with the sheath first, and then rotate your sheath so that the tip goes into the mouth of the sheath, and then with contact on the spine of the blade, you slide it back, and then avoid knocking around. Each knocking around will blunt your blade right away. Then you may ask something. If so much care has to be put to maintain the initial sharpness of the sword, because we want to save the initial sharpness on the opponent, right? What happens in fighting combat environment, you can put so much care to the sheathing and unsheathing in combat environment. That is true. In combat environment, you may say that your blade is expected to be blunted by the operation of the combat mission. What I mean by the mission is that, for example, in a doomsday scenario, you are going out to collect some food and water with the sword by your side, ready to be deployed in combat. Even without actually making an hostile encounter where you have to draw your sword out and fight, even without that, just by the trip alone, going out searching, take things back, it will blunt your sword a little bit. This is expected. It's just like sending a F-22 Raptor to the sky to patrol around, make sure no enemies were interfering, and then combat. Without firing a single shot, each hour of flight will take many hours of maintenance to make it to keep it in top shape. This happens to even the modern fighter jet aircraft. It is the same in the case of our sword. Even without facing combat, just by being active in the combat mission itself, will blunt the blade a little bit each time. This is inevitable, unavoidable. Because when you are carrying your sword, running around, taking stuff, putting it back, there is some knocking that is going to happen inside the ship that is unavoidable. But we will try to preserve the edge sharpness as much as possible, humanly possible, outside of combat environment, so that your sword sharpness can be preserved for that moment, instead of keep wearing it off normally in daily life, right? And what happened in combat then, you may ask? You don't have to consider that, because your sword is not going to last over a big battle or several single versus single engagement. Depending on how good you are actually on single versus single engagement, if you manage to neutralize your opponent in one strike without any contact, then your sword is going to be able to fight another one. But if that contact, that hostile encounter takes many contact to neutralize, then your sword may be already done. You see, how long your sword is going to last depends on how good you are. And the sharper the blade is, the less intention you are going to give out before the strike, because you don't have to muscle it up and then strike down. Then you are more likely to hit the target. It is like a stealth fighter. The more stealth it has, the more likely it can hit the target without being noticed. Same thing goes with your sword. The sharper it is, the less force you need to cut with, the more stealthy you will become, and the more likely your strike is going to land, because your opponent may not notice it coming around. But if you have to force the cut in, then your opponent is likely to evade or defend, right? So the sharpness is very important, but do not expect it to last long, or do not expect it to last through a battle at all. That your sword is not going to last through a battle. Another point about sharpness is that the sharpness will define how you fight with your sword. With a sharper sword, your attacking motion can be minimalized into something like this. 長槍式啊嘛，試下。And it still works when it hit your target. So, but with a blunter sword, you will have to do the same strike like this. And you can see the intention was telegraphed much bigger toward your opponents when compared to something like this. Okay? So the sharpness of the sword will actually affect how you fight with it. It will affect your swordsmanship and affects the probability of actually landing a hit, because a strike like this is much less likely to land than a strike like this. The smaller motion, the more hidden, the stealthy hits will be easier to actually land on your opponents, and this can only be done if your sword is sharp enough to make such small motion, less power the strike to be effective on the target, right? If a strike with just so much motion can cut off a forearm for you, then there isn't a need for you to risk exposing yourself to hit your opponent's forearm with this strike and trade a neutral kill as a result. So the sharpness is very, very important part of the sword. It's just as important as the caliber and the gunpowder and the round of the rifle that you are using. For example, a sharper sword allows you to hit with smaller motion strikes. It's also, you can compare this to a rifle utilizing a better ammunition, an ammunition that has less recoil, more precision when firing, and more penetrative power against armored, something like that. So you don't have to risk yourself that much, as well as landing more hits on the target. This is what sharpness in the swords means. This is also an aspect that most, if not all, the swordsmen out there right now in modern society ignores and don't know anything about. The sharpness of the sword will form the style you fight with it. So, for example, if your sword is a blunter sword to start to begin with, then your swordsmanship will not have cuts like this. It will not have cut like this. It will always be powerful swing, right? Because otherwise your sword is not going to make an effective cut, even if it hits. But the probability of it hitting someone is lower than if a sword can cut effectively like this. Okay? This is much less predictable. So maybe someone will have a question that, but I want to preserve my sword durability. I doesn't want it to break, or I want it to be able to fight longer. So I want a blunter sword. This is actually a very stupid notion. For example, even a blunt sparring sword can be broken in a bout, and it happened many times before. Even blunt sword took damage in a contact. And even blunt sword can be broken in a contact. Of course, then, compared to a sharp sword, the sharp sword will take damage in a much bigger degree and break much faster. That is true. But no matter how blunt you make your sword to be, it will still get damaged and broken eventually. Plus, there is another point. If you try to preserve your sword by making it blunter, and then your cuts and strike became ineffective against your opponent, then you get killed. And then your sword stay behind after you get killed to be a loot for your opponent to pick up and sell, and become his treasure. Ha ha. So you are actually giving a gift to your opponent by making your sword blunter, less effective but more durable, right? So the sword outlived your lifespan and become your opponent's possession. Is that a good idea? You tell me. Okay, that's about it.